Hello everybody, welcome. I'm Vivek and today I'll be talking about nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy is an extremely important topic in analytical chemistry. And if you are a student of B Pharmacy and studying in your third year or final year B Pharm, then you have pharmaceutical analysis, so this is an important topic for you. If you are a student of Masters of Pharmacy and if you are studying structural elucidation, this topic will be the base for you. In order to understand nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, let us understand the meaning of each word, that is nuclear magnetic resonance and spectroscopy. So let me begin with spectroscopy. So spectroscopy is the interaction of electromagnetic radiation with matter. Then what is resonance? Resonance is matching of frequency. Then in case of NMR you require a magnet. So why this magnet is needed? So magnet is the heart of the instrument and it is responsible to eliminate degeneracy among the nuclei. We'll understand this in detail later on. So understand the meaning of degeneracy. Degeneracy means same level. So basically if anything has same level of energy, this magnet will make that or eliminate that degeneracy. And then which nucleus can we analyze by NMR? So only those nucleus which have spin. So just remember this, that only those nucleus which have spin can be analyzed by nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. So when I say N, we need to remember that only those which have spin. M means magnet. This magnet will help lose the degeneracy. Then we have R. R is resonance. Resonance is matching of frequency. And S we know is spectroscopy, meaning it is the interaction of matter and energy. Then let us understand why this NMR is useful. So NMR is useful because it reveals the structure of the organic compound. When I say it reveals the structure of organic compound, what does it do? It actually tells us how many different kind of magnetic environment that are present in the molecule. Then it tells us how many atoms are present in each of these environment. And then it also tells us which atoms are present in the neighboring group. Initially, this may sound a bit difficult to understand, but let me try and take an example of ethanol, that is CH3, CH2 and OH. And another example that I'll take is of ether. So I'll try and explain you how NMR tells us about the environment. So if you check ethanol and ether, ether is symmetrical, ethanol is not symmetrical, so or unsymmetrical. So because ethanol is unsymmetrical, what I'll do is I'll mark this methyl group, then the methylene group and the hydroxyl group. So these are the three magnetic environments or different magnetic environments that are present in ethanol. So let me label them as A, B and C. If we check the symmetrical structure ether, we can see that there is only methyl on each side of oxygen. So there is only one environment. So let me label that as A. So your NMR will tell us how many types of magnetic environment. Then in that environment, how many atoms are present. For example, methyl of ethanol has 3, methylene has 2, hydroxyl has 1. So that information can be revealed. And then also the third information that is revealed is about the neighboring group. So basically it will tell us that A has 2 protons in the neighbor, B has 3 protons in the neighbor. So that information will be revealed by NMR, which we'll understand gradually. The question that has remained unanswered is which nuclei have a spin. So if mass number or atomic number, that is either of them, are odd, then in such a case the nucleus will have a spin. and that spin would be a half integral. I have taken the example of oxygen isotope with mass number 17. This has a spin value of 5 by 2, which is a half integral. Sodium with mass number 23 has a I value of 3 by 2. Other examples which are important with respect to NMR are hydrogen, carbon, fluorine, phosphorus. All of these have a I value of 1 by 2, or it is half, and since they have a I value, it means they have spin. If the mass number and atomic number both are even, in such a case the nucleus, the I value is 0, and then the nucleus has no spin. Take the example of carbon 12, oxygen 16. Carbon 12 has mass number of 12 and atomic number of 6. Oxygen 16 has a mass number of 16 and atomic number of 8. In such a case, these nucleus, they don't have any spin and they are not detected by NMR. Now the third category is if the protons and neutrons both are odd. Here I am not talking about mass number and atomic number. Here I am talking about the number of protons and neutrons that are present in the nucleus. If the protons and neutrons both are odd, then the I is a whole number and the nucleus has a spin. Let me make it clear, I have not used mass number and atomic number over here. I have said the protons and neutrons that are present in the nucleus both are odd, then the nucleus has a spin and the spin value is a whole number. Let us take example of nitrogen. Nitrogen 14. In this case, nitrogen has 7 protons and 7 neutrons. Both are odd. The I value is 1. Deuterium has a proton number of 1 and neutron number of 1. So I value is 1. Boron has a proton number of 5 and neutron number of 5. I value is 3. So if the proton and neutron both are odd, I value is a whole number, and if it has a number, it means it will have a spin. So let me repeat again. What we need to remember is if mass number and atomic number are both even, then it is not detected by NMR. If mass number or atomic number are odd, it means it will be detected by the NMR. What is the use of these spin numbers? The spin numbers would help us calculate the total allowed spin states, and the formula for that is 2i plus 1. Let us take the example of hydrogen. Hydrogen has a mass number of 1 and atomic number of 1, and since both of these are odd, we have the I value as 1 by 2. If the I value is 1 by 2, using the formula 2i plus 1, I can calculate the spin states as follows, and the value that I get is 2. That means hydrogen has 2 spin states. Those spin states are minus half and plus half. What is the use of knowing these spin states? If you recall what you have studied earlier, you will remember that if we have a charged particle, this charged particle, if it moves, then it will have a magnetic field of its own. Now in case of hydrogen, we know that there is one proton in the nucleus, and if this proton moves, what will happen is it will have a magnetic field, and because of that magnetic field, it will have a magnetic moment. So if I call this as plus half, this I can call as minus half. So hydrogen has 2 spin states, plus half and minus half, and these protons, they have a magnetic field. That means these protons, they behave like tiny magnet. When we have a bar magnet, and this bar magnet, when it is suspended, it aligns itself along the north and south direction. This is because of the Earth's magnetic field. Now when we have these protons, which are the tiny magnets, they are arranged in random manner. As they are arranged in random manner, what they do is they nullify each other's magnetic field. So the overall magnetic field is 0. But what happens when they are brought under the influence of a magnet or under the influence of an external magnetic field? What they do is these protons, they align themselves either in the direction of the applied magnetic field or against the direction of the applied magnetic field. When there is no field, then the protons, they are arranged randomly and they nullify each other's magnetic field. But under the presence of an external magnet, they align themselves either in the direction or opposite to the direction. On the y-axis I have energy, and on the x-axis I have magnetic field. When there is no magnetic field, these protons, they are degenerate, that is, they have the same energy. But under the influence of a magnetic field, their energy changes. There is an energy gap that is created, and those protons which are aligned along the direction of the applied magnetic field have lower energy, and those which are aligned against the direction of the applied magnetic field are having higher energy. So this has low and this has high. The analogy that you need to remember is that if you swim along the direction of the flow of the river, the energy required is lesser. But if you swim against the direction of the flow of the river, then the energy required is higher. So there is an energy gap that is created between the protons. So when there is no magnetic field, there is no energy gap, and when there is a magnetic field, there is an energy gap. This energy gap is essential because I told you that spectroscopy is interaction of electromagnetic radiation with matter. So when we have this energy gap, then there would be some energy or electromagnetic radiation which could interact with these nucleus or with these protons. To understand the theory of NMR, there are two terms which are very important to remember. The first term is magnetogyric ratio and the second is Larmor frequency or precessional frequency. Magnetogyric ratio is the ratio of magnetic moment to its angular momentum, and it is denoted by the symbol gamma. Larmor frequency or precessional frequency. This is the precision of magnetic moment of any object with a magnetic moment about an external magnetic field. This is the nucleus which is under the influence of an external magnetic field. This is the magnetic moment of external magnetic field, and this is a tiny magnet, and the nucleus itself is a tiny magnet, so that has its own magnetic moment. I had mentioned that the nucleus aligned itself along the direction of the applied magnetic field. However, the nucleus is not exactly parallel to the applied magnetic field, but it is aligned at an angle, and that angle is theta, and this theta is dependent upon the magnetogyric ratio, which is the ratio of magnet to angular momentum, and this ratio is specific and is dependent upon the mass and charge. So when we have proton which has a mass number of 1, and when we have carbon 13 which has a mass number of 13, the mass number and the charge number for these two is different. So the ratio of magnetic moment to angular momentum would be different. As the protons are not able to completely align itself along the direction of the applied magnetic field, what they do is they start wobbling, and the motion which you see on the screen is the wobbling motion, or this motion is also called as the precessional motion, and the frequency which is associated with this motion is called as the precessional frequency. This precessional frequency is dependent upon the applied magnetic field. So when we have a magnetic field of 1.4 Tesla, let's try and take a look at this diagram carefully. When we have a magnetic field of 1.4 Tesla, the frequency is 60 megahertz, and this is the energy gap between the protons. When we increase it to 4.7 Tesla, the frequency increases to 200 and the energy gap is also increased. So as we go on increasing the magnetic field, the frequency goes on increasing, and if you check, the energy gap also goes on increasing. So we have delta E as a function of applied magnetic field. Also this delta E is a function of gamma, that is magnetogyric ratio. Therefore we can say delta E is actually function of magnetogyric ratio gamma and the external magnetic field. Now the angular momentum is quantized in terms of h by 2 pi. Therefore this equation delta E can be written as gamma h by 2 pi b 0. Now this energy gap has to be satisfied by electromagnetic radiations, and this electromagnetic radiation can be expressed as h nu. Now I can write this equation gamma h by 2 pi b0 is equal to h nu, and I can cancel out the similar term. So I get gamma b0 by 2 pi is equal to the frequency. So this is the frequency of electromagnetic radiation that would be required to satisfy the energy gap between the protons. This is what is the spectroscopy, which is interaction of matter with energy, and when this frequency or when this energy gap is satisfied, what happens is resonance. In case of NMR, the frequency is the frequency in case of NMR, the frequency that is required is radio frequency. And remember, these radio frequencies, they are having less energy, and since they have less energy, they have less sensitivity. If I have to summarize this, I'll say we need a nucleus. That nucleus should have spin. We need a magnet. This magnet will induce energy gap among the nucleus. That will result in, then we require radio frequency. This radio, when the radio frequency matches the energy, when the energy associated with radio frequency matches the energy gap of the proton, we say resonance has occurred, and that is what is your spectroscopy. That is interaction of matter with energy. When resonance occurs, the protons which are in the lower energy state, they absorb energy and they jump to the higher energy state. That is, they flip. Now the number of protons in the lower energy state and the number of protons in the higher energy state, that is the population density, can be calculated using the Boltzmann equation. Using this equation, if we want to calculate the number of protons in the upper energy state and lower energy state, let us put the temperature as 25 degrees Celsius and assume that the instrument is operating at 60 megahertz. If we have 2 million or 20 lakh nuclei, in that case, the number of protons which are in the upper energy state are 1 million or 10 lakh, and the number of protons which are in the lower energy state are 1 million plus 9 or 10 lakh plus 9. So these 9 protons which are in the denominator or in the lower energy state are called as the excess population, and these excess nuclei are the one that allow us to observe resonance. When 60 MHz radiation is applied, it not only induces transition upward but it also stimulates transition downward. If the population of upper and lower state become exactly equal, we observe no net signal. Such a situation is called as saturation, and one must be extremely careful that saturation doesn't occur when performing NMR experiment. Thank you.